The next thing we are going to discuss now is JavaScript loops. I know we've discussed iteration during array methods, how you can go through or loop through an array. So JavaScript also provides us some key word that we can use to execute a code block over and over again. And one of them is for. The syntax for is you start with the keyword for, followed by the parenthesis. And this keyword, this parenthesis takes three statements. The first statement is where you can initialize the variable that you want to use for your counter. So you can say let I equals to 0. So this is where you initialize your variable where you want to use to either to a counter to check for the next condition. The second, now take note of this. This is a semicolon, not a comma. Use semicolon here. Then the second statement is the conditional statement, which must return true for the loop to continue. So here is the condition where you need, let me write this in Word, initial value. Here is your condition, and this one, this third statement is something that will execute in every loop. So it's going to execute this line in every loop. So sometimes we can use it to increment our counter. We can use the third statement to increment our counter. So again, statement 1 will execute just one time before the execution of the block. And statement 2 is the condition in which the block will be executed. And the statement 3 will be executed every time after the code block has been executed. So this is the hierarchy. This one will run once, then the condition will be checked. If the condition is true, this code block will be executed. After execution of this code block, the incrementing of counter will be executed. Now, this can be incrementing or decrementing of counter, or some other thing that you decide to do here. It's not necessary that you just increment only. So, but those are one of the tasks that you can do here. All right, so this is the syntax. of a for, here is where you put your code block to execute. So why do you even need a loop to start with? So loops are very useful if you want to run the same code block over and over again, each time with different values. So remember how our array loop or array iteration goes. It goes for each value of the array is running the function again and again with different value. So that is the same way your for operates. So if you want to run this code block multiple times, you want to run it multiple times with different value, that is when you can consult your for loop. So I will give you an example. Imagine that we want to run so we want to add all even number between 1 and 10. All even number between 1 and 10. We want to calculate the total. So in order to do that, you will do something like this. Let total equals to 0, right? And you want to add all the even number between 1 to 10. So your 2 is an even number. Then you want to also add 4. You also want to add 6. You also want to add 8. And you also want to add 10, right? So this is how you would have done it on a normal day. But then we can also use loop, because if you look at this code, this is a repetition. These are all repetitions. The only difference is the value that is being added. So that is a good use for your for loop, because your for loop execute the code block, with different value. So if we want to transform this to our for loop, all we have to do is use your for loop. And now this is where you need to check for the values. So if we say I equals to I equals to 0 or 1, because we want to start from 1, right? 1 to 10. So I equals to 1. The condition for execution is I less than or equal to 10. Now we want to continue running this code block as long as our condition is met, which means if I is still less than or equals to 10, continue running our code block. Now, the statement 3, the third statement of our for, which is the incrementing, we can do I++, because we want to increase I by 1 at every execution. So this for is going to be executed like 10 times. So let's print the value of I. If you run this code, you see I start from 1 all the way to 10. So this one line of code is executed 10 times. It's executed 10 times because for every execution, we increase our I by 1. Remember plus plus. Plus plus is the same as I plus equals to 1. Remember the last time we treated that. So this statement will be executed every time after the code block is executed. And that is why this will continue incrementing by 1. And once it increments, it's going to check the condition again. Is the condition still true? If the condition is still true, it will execute this code block again. And it will come back to increment the number again. So when it increments this up to 10, which is the last time this condition will be true, that will be the last time it will execute this code. And it will still increment this again, and it will become 11. It will come back to check this condition. Is 11 less than or equal to 10? That is now false. So it will exit the loop, and it will not execute the loop anymore. And that is why you see 1 to 10. So now we want to implement this because we don't want to write so many lines of code like this. So we can, so let's console log your total here so that you see what our total value is doing the manual check. And now let's reset our total to 0 and try to use our loop to do the same. So if you check this, you see that your total is 30. So if we want to use our loop to calculate this, we need to check if the number, which is I, is an even number, right? So we use our if statement here to say, is I modulus 2 equals to 0? If it is equal to 0, we want to add that I to our total variable. So if we print I here, you will notice that this print will only execute for every time this condition is true. And at the end of the loop, let's print our total. Let's call it new total so that we know the difference, yeah? So if we execute this code, you see that your total here is 30, your new total here is also 30, which we used the loop. And this loop, the condition is only true for all the even numbers. Now, this doesn't mean that the loop only executed 5 times. Of course, it executed 10 times, but it only executing this if statement that we put here when this condition is met. So if this condition is not met, it will continue going until this condition is met, it will execute this. So this is the first condition of coming into this code block. And there is another condition that has to be met for another code block to be executed. So you see how we mixed the for and an if statement together to achieve our results. All right, so take note, your first statement will be executed only once. And that is where you can set your initial variable or your counter that you want to use. And now note that this first statement is not compulsory, is not required. Also, this third statement is not required, but this one is always required because your for needs a condition to check in order to run this code block. So let's say, for example, if we want to define our I counter outside, we can also leave this one blank, but make sure that you put in the semicolon to terminate, to let JavaScript know that this is the second statement. And you terminate again, this is the third statement. So we can also remove this one and add the incrementing inside the loop. So which means this one is blank, this one is blank, only condition we are passing. So if we run this code, it will give you exactly the same result. Because we are incrementing inside here and we are setting the counter outside. But make sure that this the semicolons are there to demarcate, because you can't say you want to pass only condition, then you remove the semicolon. If you remove the semicolon, it means that this is the first statement. So it's not going to see this one as the condition, it's going to see it as the first statement. So make sure that you follow the syntax correctly. But I don't advise using this form because it will get you confused. So always use it like this. This is more advisable and is easier to read. All right. That is for loop. Now, JavaScript provides us with multiple ways that we can go through a loop to execute code blocks. So for is one of them. We have other loop. Now, the next loop is for in. For in. Now, your for in loops through the property of an object. You see this one, we are looping through based on a condition. Your for in loops through a property of an object. So for example, if you have object C that has name and have age, you can use for in to go through the property and print the values. So here is the syntax. You start with a for, then followed by the variable name which you want to use to hold this key. Remember, for in loops through a property of an object, not the value, the property. So if we say x or key, which is what it is, for key in C, are you getting the picture? The key is not the value. We are accessing the key. We are accessing the key. So you do like this. This is the syntax. The name of the variable, name of variable in the object we want to loop, then followed by the code block that you want to execute. Block to execute. This is the syntax of for in. This is the syntax. So take note of that. So if you want to loop through this key now, we say for key is the name of the variable, not this key is going to represent each of these properties that you have here. In C, which is the name of the object, we want to console.log the key. We want to log the key so you see what is going on. So if you run this code, you see the first key is name, the second key is age. So it's going through this key one by one. If you have 1 million properties here, it's going to go through all of them. It's going to go through all of them. So now, if you want to, why do you need to go through a property of an object? Let's say you want to access each individual value. You can access the value of the object using C, then passing key as the accessor. Remember how to access an object here. We put the property name. So since our key is representing the property name, you can easily print it here. So we will say value. So if you print this, you see that you have name, the value is Lovett, you have age, the value is 10. And you can do anything beyond your imaginations. Just your imagination is the limit to what you can do in this code block. Once you have the key and you can able to access the value, you can do anything you want to check here. Just like here we were doing if it's an even number. We can also check here to see if type of the value, if type of value is equals to number, we want to print your age is, then the value. So you see this, you can also do this. You see here, it prints your ages, but it didn't print anything for Lovett because we are checking the type of, and only age is a number. This one is a string. So we can also check for a particular key. Say we want to check for the name. You can also come down here to check if key is equals to name. We want to console log your name is, then C accessing by the key. And you now, if you print this, you see your name is Lovett here and your age is 10. So it is just your imagination that limits what you can do here. You can do anything with the value you retrieve. Depending on your use case or what you need to achieve, we decide what you want to do here. Your for in can also loop through a property of an array, because remember that your array is also an object, right? So if we define an array, const n equals to 1, 2, 3. Remember that the property of an array is an index. Those 0, 1, 2, those are the properties. So if you do for, in this case, index in n, you can also console log index value here, and it's going to give you 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Which we expect to be the property of the array. So it's not only for objects with properties and value, but also an array. You can also access it using the for in. Do you have any question?
No.
All right. We also have for off. We also have for off. For off, yeah. Maybe we should stop here. So we use the time that is left to give us assignments. We treat this one in the next class. For off, then while loop. I don't want to rush it. We've spent more time. All right, general question for what we've done so far before the assignment.
I don't have question.
General question. All right. So, all right. Task. Is it 17 now? Yep. So, create an array of random numbers. Create array of random numbers. No. Yes, let's make this creation of array more fun, right? So create an empty array. Use a loop to insert numbers that are divisible by 3 or 5. Use a loop to insert numbers that are divisible by 3 or 5 to insert numbers between 0 and 100. So use a loop to insert numbers between 0 and 100 that are divisible by 3 or 5. That's what you will insert in this empty array that you created. Now, loop through the array and modify all the even index. Look through the array and modify all the even index and let's say multiply all the even index by 2 and replace the previous value in that index. Look through the array and multiply all the even index by 2 and replace the previous value in that index. So, example, you have variable Remember, numbers that are divisible by 3 or 5. So 3 is divisible by 3, 5 is divisible by 5, 9 is divisible by 3, 15 is also divisible by 3 and 5. So this is your sample array that you generated. So after you run the second one, going through and multiplying by 2, the even index. So the even index is your new array, or your new A array will become, remember, even. 0 is not even, so it will remain as 3. 1 is not even, so this will remain as 5. 2 is even, so you are going to multiply 9 times 2, which is 18. Then this is 0, 1, 2, 3. So your 3 is also not even, so it will remain at 15. So this is what this last one is saying it should do. So,
2 cannot divide that. In this array, you cannot have even.
You cannot have what?
Even number.
I said the index.
Okay.
I said index 0, 1, 2, 3.
Right.
The index. Even index. That's why I'm explaining this one by one here. All right, task 17. Create an array, an empty array. Create an empty array. Use a loop to insert numbers between 0 and 100 that are divisible by 3 or 5. Loop through that array and multiply all the even index by 2 and replace the previous value in that index. So I gave you an example here. This is all numbers that are divisible by 3 and 5. Check the index. If the index is an even number, multiply it by 2. In this case, our position 2 is an even number, so the value changes to 18. Others remain the same because they are odd numbers, or they are not even numbers. All right,